Gerard, good morning. My name is Lee Bratcher. I'm the president of the Texas Blockchain Council, talking about state and local adoption. I've got a couple slides, but the clicker doesn't seem to be working, which is okay. There we go, able to pass several pieces of legislation this last session in Texas, the 87th session. With the help of some legislative partners, we conducted the research and passed two bills, House Bill 1576 and House Bill 4474. Let's see, there we go. I do want to point out that SEC Commissioner Hester Peirce commented that of the importance of state policy incubators, being able to create policy at the state level to let it bubble up to the national level. So that's one thing that we're doing. AREU of the Cascadia Blockchain Association has created a loose coalition of state associations. So there's about 25 or so state associations that do what we do here in Texas, all around the country. And so if you're this is obviously a diverse audience from different states, reach out to us afterwards to let us know if perhaps there's a state association in your state that's working on this. And if there's not, maybe you're the one that starts it. And so when the infrastructure bill came down, several months ago, or I guess several weeks ago, the Blockchain Association reached out to Ari and I to sign an open letter to legislators from our states, and we had 25 state associations that signed those letters. Can I get the next slide? So the two bills, I want to talk about House Bill 4474 first, because it is the most important of the two. This is our Uniform Commercial Code bill, so model legislation, right? The states, each of the 50 states has a uniform commercial code. They're typically uniform, as the name would suggest. There are slight modifications whenever there's an emerging technology like blockchain that comes out. So what we did was we modified our Uniform Commercial Code in Texas in Chapter 9 of the code. So for those attorneys that are in the room, you may know what I'm talking about. It did a couple things. There we go. The few things that it did was it defined what virtual currencies were for the purpose of blockchain legislation. It established what it means to control a virtual currency. So virtual currency is the term that these uniform commercial codes use, but we all know that we're referring to cryptocurrency. And most importantly, it established that if you need to perfect your security interest in a general intangible, you can do that through control. So previously, if you wanted to perfect your security interest in something, you had to file a UCC1 claim with the Secretary of State of your state, or a financing statement, so that you can perfect that collateral. If you're using crypto as collateral for a real estate purchase or something of that nature, you can now perfect it simply by possessing the cryptographic keys, which is important because it sends a signal to innovators. Hey, this state is thinking deeply about these issues, and we want innovators, venture capital, to come to our state. So the governor, obviously, Governor Abbott signed both of these bills. They went into effect September 1st, just a few weeks ago. This had a ripple effect in our state. Number one, the effect in the media had the effect of bringing entrepreneurs and venture capital to Texas. But number two, it actually sent a signal to other regulators in the state, like the banking commissioner. We communicated to him, showed him the videos that Governor Abbott was creating about these pieces of legislation, and pushed them out into social media. We sent the banking commissioner these videos, and he actually worked with his staff and his legal team to draft regulatory guidance for Texas charter banks that they can custody cryptocurrency. So you and I will probably always custody crypto. We'll self-custody, we'll custody on exchange or a hardware wallet. But there are a lot of people, perhaps those that are maybe later adopters, that want their banks to custody things for them. Their banks have always custodied, their assets. And so even though it's not going to be the early adopters that custody crypto or their digital assets in their bank, because that just doesn't make sense for those of us that are like digital currency native or technology natives. There'll be a lot of people from the greatest generation and from perhaps our parents' generation that will choose to custody that way. So it's It's a pretty big deal to get state banking commissioners like Faulkner in Wyoming and Mr. Charles Cooper in Texas to make these kinds of announcements. So for those of you that are coming from states that don't have any model legislation, I'm happy to provide copies, insight on those. If we can go to the next slide, this is just that was just a slide of the actual legislative text. And then we'll do the next slide because these are the three things that I already discussed. Okay, I'm going to be followed by County Commissioner Gardner. She's from Utah, paving the way for an elected official, paving the way for blockchain adoption in her state and beyond. So Commissioner Gardner, thanks for being here.
Thank you, everybody. I'm excited to be here. This is the second time I've been able to speak at this conference, but I wanted to share with you guys on how we practically implement blockchain in our local and state governments. I think it's really important to recognize that the local level is where blockchain adoption can happen and where it can happen today. I ran for office in 2018. People always ask me why I decided to run for office, and I told them it was a moment of personal weakness. I chose to run for office. I guess I'm a glutton for punishment. Left the private sector as an engineer, took a 60% pay cut to join the public sector to be abused by the public on a regular basis. And as I look at why, the reason why is I felt like we needed somebody that could implement these, not just talk about them on the floor of a regulatory body, but actually implement them. And so I want to show you how we've implemented these in the state of Utah and how people can implement them beyond. I don't know if, I was in the back yesterday, I don't know if you guys saw me, but while Charles was speaking, I literally had my hands in the air and I was like, preach, brother, you preach it. I mean, it was fantastic. I gotta tell you, Austrian economics and the social credit score and everything you were saying was absolutely right down. And this is why I left the private sector, because I came into the public sector to make a difference. We are absolutely, like Charles said, paving the way on how humanity is going to interact. I just wanted to talk a little bit about that before we jump to my slides. You know, back in the day, pre-Gutenberg Bible, everything was by a central authority, right? Everything was by a central authority. And the only way to accomplish anything was through a large central authority. And over the last 200 years, as the world has become more democratized, we've gone to decentralized, where we have centers of control rather than a large center of control. Local government is that center of control in your local area. And that has worked really well to bring freedom and liberty to humanity over the last 200 years. But we're at a point right now where we have the technology to move beyond decentralization and to the distributed network. And the difference between that is in a distributed network, you don't even need your local government. You can control your access to information and you can control your future. And that is where the rubber meets the road. And this is why state and local adoption is so critical. So let's go to the first slide. The key to adoption is to create the legislation. We need to create a regulatory environment where both blockchain and crypto can thrive. I've recently been speaking to several members of Congress and here in DC and back at home in Utah, they've come out to talk to me about recognizing the difference between blockchain and crypto. It became apparent through the infrastructure bill that our federal government does not understand the difference between blockchain and crypto. So we have to create, just like Lee said, we have to create this environment at the state level and at the local level. We need to create regulatory sandboxes. We have model legislation in the state of Utah that creates a regulatory sandbox. Several other states have this in the fintech area where new technology and emerging technology has 2 years that they can operate in that space so that regulators can figure it out instead of just shutting them down. So if you start a blockchain business or any business in the state of Utah and the regulators don't know what to do with it, you have 2 years to help the legislature figure out how to deal with your industry where you can function. That's that is critical as we move forward with emerging technology. And we need to focus on non-crypto blockchain. I'm still on almost a daily basis discussing with legislators the difference between blockchain and crypto. So we need to create model legislation. The way you do that is you find people with the political will. At the local level, you find an evangelist like myself that cares about this. And in your legislatures, you need to find people that care about this. You find the political will, create your coalitions, and you get your subject matter experts. That's key. We've got to have those subject matter experts to come in and help create this. And then look at adopting model legislation from other states. Follow what Lee did in Texas. Let's look at the things that Tyler did in Wyoming. And in Utah, things like our regulatory sandbox, as well as some other nuances for licensing that I'll go into. Let's go to the next slide. So how could local government use blockchain? Now, yesterday, we heard from several speakers about different use cases. At the local level, these are the ones that are most prominent. We've got elections. Obviously, Josh spoke about elections yesterday. We've got the remote ballot marking, auditability, securing the voter registration list on the blockchain, et cetera. Another one is transparency. I think Charles talked about that yesterday when he talked about the military spending. And this is not just transparency, this is radical transparency. How do you lose dollars? I mean, prior to being the county commissioner, I was the county auditor. We record everything. You don't just lose dollars. The question is, why can't we see that? Blockchain is the answer to that radical transparency. Licensing, which I'll go through in a little bit, I'll show you our use cases for licensing. Identity. So here's a fun one with identity. Do you realize that government gets to control who you are? Isn't that crazy? Just think about that. Who you are. So your birth certificate, it's housed at a government office. Your driver's license, a government office. Your marriage certificate, a government office. So let's merge that with this social credit score. What happens if your government doesn't like your social credit score? Do they have the ability to just make your birth certificate erase? But what if we recorded that on the blockchain? Now let's look at an actual practical application. Let's say, for example, you happen to live in a country that was taken over by the Taliban last month, and you had to evacuate that country as quickly as possible. How do you prove you are who you say you are? Because you didn't have time to grab your birth certificate, your marriage certificate, your passport, your business licenses. What if we put all that on the blockchain? And all you needed was your keys, and you could get that. Also, land records. One of the things that makes this country different than other countries was the ability to own land without being an aristocrat, right? You could own land, but you only truly own that land if you can prove you own that land. This is a game changer in the third world if we can record land on the blockchain. And then as far as crypto goes at the local level, you can use it as a payment type. I think Miami is looking at this because they've got one of the largest unbanked populations in the nation. You can pay in crypto, also investments. Now, there's some barriers. In the state of Utah, we have something called the Money Management Act, and that prevents governments from investing our portfolios into risky things. And so we have to work with our state legislatures to make sure that if we have the political will to purchase a Bitcoin and hold it in the holdings of our county, that we do so. We also, looking at large banking institutions, the more that large banking institutions accept crypto, the more likely we are to be able to invest in it as a government. And then obviously, like El Salvador, adopting crypto as an official currency. Let's go to the next slide. So what are the current blockchain uses in local government? This is really important. I want you to understand that blockchain use in local government isn't just theory. We're doing it today. A lot of people in local government don't realize that. So in elections, right now, at least in our county, and at least 20 other jurisdictions throughout the country, there is some form of blockchain voting. Right now, it's at the base level where what happens is a vote cast is recorded on a blockchain for auditing purposes. But at the base level, we have people that are voting in blockchain today. And I don't know if Josh mentioned it yesterday. I think you did with your NFT that, we have a presidential election. Josh actually cast the first presidential vote on a blockchain in history. So we've done this. We did it in 2020. As far as currency, obviously El Salvador has adopted Bitcoin as an official currency. And there are several governments that are allowing payment options with coins that are pegged to the dollar. Now, as far as licensing goes, in licensing, you could do any licensing with a digital seal. One of the things that I think is interesting is that in a free nation, we have to get permission slips from the government to do just about anything. You need a permission slip to open a restaurant. You need a permission slip to have a swimming pool. You need a permission slip to get married. Well, the crazy thing about these permission slips is the only place you can get them is the government office, which means they have a monopoly. Which means for the last 200 years, you have to show up at the government office between 8:30 a.m. and 4:30 p.m. Monday through Friday, regardless of whether or not you have a day job. You have to stand in line and you have to fill out a piece of paper on a clipboard, and then you turn in your information to receive your permission slip, basically. Digital seals give us the ability to change that. They give us the ability to put that stamp or that seal on a piece of paper without you actually having to have that piece of paper. So we're doing this right now in Utah County with marriage certificates. We launched our marriage certificate portal in 2019. In 2020, we did over 10,700 marriage certificates with a digital seal in Utah County. We just recently launched version 5. So we started this project when I was elected. I think it was like January 9th, 2019 is when I was sworn into office. And within a month, we had launched our digital marriage license product. Now, we had to go through a whole development process. We launched version 2 in January of 2020, January of 2020, and everybody told me that I had a solution that was looking for a problem. Remote marriage licenses, a solution looking for a problem. And then March of 2020 happened. And all of a sudden I was a prophet. Because the world shut down and nobody could give you a marriage license. You could not get married in Las Vegas, Nevada, but you could get married in Utah. So let's go to the next slide. Oh, thank you. So this is how we did it. This is a really quick overview. Basically, the user's mobile device speaks to the marriage license system. You verify your identity. You enter your information, and then you get emailed a marriage license. Your officiant performs your ceremony. The officiant and witnesses complete a form on their phone. They literally scan a QR code on your phone. They fill it out. And then we utilize a blockchain seal to essentially put that special stamp on your PDF. And we issue you a marriage certificate. Let's go to the next slide. So where do we go from here? This is the key that I want people to take away. Where do we go from here? Well, the next steps is we need acceptance of these digital documents. Right now, TSA accepts our digital documents as a valid marriage certificate, but the Social Security Administration does not. Now, I've spoken to several congressmen and senators. They love the idea. We will be running federal legislation soon that says that the federal government has to accept official digital documents certified by state and local government. That will be huge. Because once the federal government, Social Security Administration, has to accept it, then there's no excuse for local governments not to do it. Then we need to create model state legislation. After we do that, then we need to expand. I'm currently doing it for marriage certificates, but we need to do this for birth certificates, driver's licenses, and other documents. In the election space, the next step in election space is doing the tokenization of votes. Instead of just merely recording the votes on the blockchain as a ledger for auditing, I would love to see, and I'm actually working with a company who's developing this now, tokenization of votes. And then next is to publish the immutable ledgers. You want to talk about transparency, you want to talk about a forensic audit. How about if every person can see every vote because it's recorded in the blockchain? And then also we need to secure the voter lists. That As a former election official myself, I'm telling you, the most vulnerable thing in the world is not when you cast a ballot, it is who casts a ballot. This gets overlooked often. We need to secure our voter lists using blockchain so we can see if they've been tampered with that immutable ledger. Next is the cybersecurity and transparency that this brings to government. We need to record access logs, financial transactions. If we have an immutable ledger, everyone becomes the auditor of the government. Like you say, it returns trust to society. And then other legislative priorities, I really think that the regulatory sandbox is the most important. The State Policy Network just awarded the state of Utah, Libertas Institute in Utah, their highest award for creating this regulatory sandbox in 2021. That's going to be the key to innovation in your state. If you can create a regulatory sandbox that will allow blockchain and crypto companies to come into your state and to innovate, then you can help create regulatory parameters around them. So, to summarize, blockchain is happening in government today. We need to find other people like myself, and we need to get them elected so that I can have help shouldering this burden. Look at other states. There are people doing it today, and then local level, because that's where the rubber meets the road. So I wish we had time for questions. I think we are out of time, so we can't take questions. However, I will be at the reception tonight. I'm hosting the elections room. So if you have any questions, I would love to interact with you tonight. If you don't have your tickets for the reception, please go buy your tickets, and let's have a lively discussion at the Whitmore Mansion tonight. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.